I guess, yeah, we want to get started. So I guess the next part of the conference or symposium is one of, I guess, the most touching parts and the part that I actually enjoyed the most last year, which is our brain injury panel. And we're lucky enough to be able to hear stories of 4 awesome people who are part of our peer support group. And this panel will be moderated by Kevin, who is essentially our cabinet member in charge of the peer support group. And he basically runs the peer support meetings that we have for people with brain injury every single Saturday. So with that, I'll hand it off to Kevin.
All right. Hello, I'm Kevin, and I'm honored to welcome you to the panel. I'm a student at Stanford, a third year, and I joined Synapse because a couple years ago, I had to take a gap year because of a brain injury. And so after coming back, I wanted to contribute as much as I could. So I joined the support group, and I fell in love with it and attended every couple weeks as the support groups happen. And so with that, with joining the support group, I've had the honor to meet some incredible people, 4 of whom are joining us on the panel today. I would introduce them one by one, but I feel that it would be a disservice to them and their story for me to tell it for them. So I would like to give the floor to the panelists to introduce themselves. So from left to right, we have Scott, Debbie, Andy, and Jason. And so first, I would like to give the floor to Scott, if you're ready. And please feel free to tell your story.
Okay, my name is Scott. I'm recovering from an accident in Cape Town, South Africa. I had small facial fractures, blood on my brain. It was a new semi-truck driver with 2 containers and 9 beams of steel. It weighed 27 tons. He was supposed to go around Pardon Island industrial area. Instead, he went straight from the store yard straight on to the N1 highway, and he hit the New Church overpass, and it landed on my Nissan 1400 pickup truck. But I'm very thankful to still be alive, and I've been making improvements every day. That's all I have to say.
Could you talk about some things that were difficult
Oh,
for you?
It's taken quite a while for me to get my memory back about certain things. I have sometimes trouble with balance and tremors, and I started back driving shortly thereafter I got out of the hospital. I went to Hudisky Hospital because City Hospital in Cape Town was full up, so they took me to Hudisky Hospital. And that was at Booth Memorial Rehab. And I was in coma for 12 days. And I was 3 months at Hudisky Hospital and a month and a half at Booth Memorial Rehab. And every day I'm feeling much better.
And my name is Debbie Dunois, and I have been helping Scott through this most difficult time. He had severe brain injury because of this crushing accident. And for myself, being someone who cares very much for him, it's just heartbreaking to see how much he struggles on a day-to-day basis. Thinking about words to say, being challenged when there's more than a few people talking, he just gets overwhelmed. I don't know which person to listen to, and as far as being independent, he's working his way towards being more independent, but he really does have a long ways to go. He started out with a Glasgow coma scale of about 6 or 7, and he's been remarkable as far as they just did not even think he was going to survive when they sent him from Hrudeski to the rehab
The
hospital.
neurologist was amazed to see me. He said to me he was surprised that I was still alive.
So that was 5 years ago, 5 years plus. And so it's been heartbreaking for me to see him struggling through this, but it's also been very inspirational to see, you know, each time he goes over a little hurdle, like, oh, I remember how to get to the store, and he'll just drive over there. And he says, well, I'm going to go see this couple that I met at the gym. And I said, well, they didn't even tell you which way to turn on the street. And he says, well, I can just go by the numbers. And I'm just going, okay. I mean, I felt like I was his mom, you know, just pray that he gets there safely. And I told him to call me before he left, and I go, stupid, you should have told him call you when he gets there. So seeing each hurdle that he's managed to clear has been a real inspiration to me, and also being a part of the Synapse group, and praises to all of you in the original starter, Alyssa Totman. She had started it way back east, and she brought it out to Stanford, and praises to her and to all of you who dedicate your life to helping everyone. I've been inspired by a lot of the people on the panel, and a lot of my precious friends out in the audience who are members also of the Synapse group, and the highs and lows of people just explaining what they've been through. And I remember one girl said that, I felt so good I kept doing this, but then she had a severe concussion. She said then she had to pay for it for 3 or 4 days later. And the fact that someone can look just perfectly wonderful, and like they say, it's an invisible disability, and people just don't understand. And Scott's told me many times,
You crawl
Debbie,
in my head, you want to crawl right back out.
it's sad but true. But anyway, God bless everybody who's going through a concussion or a severe brain injury. My kudos to you for the fight that you have, and just want to encourage all of you to keep on trucking.
Every day is a new day. And from this day forward, we're just going to keep on going forward. There's no more backwards.
Well said.
Thank you, Debbie and Scott. Kudos to you as well, and thank you for all the encouragement. Yeah. We love you.
Love you too.
All right. Next, I want to hand the floor to Andy.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Debbie and Scott, for sharing. I know I've spent a lot of time with them in the concussion group, and it's been really great to get to know them, and really great to see the progress that Scott's made as well. So, as Kevin said, my name's Andy, and I'm going to share a little background about my history with brain injuries, and then hopefully try to explain a little bit about what I'm going through today and what it's like to live with the brain injury now. So I've had 3 concussions before, and my first one was about 8 years ago. I was playing basketball, and in practice I dove for a loose ball. Unfortunately for me, one of my teammates also dove for that loose ball. His knee ended up hitting me in the head, and then my head ended up hitting the floor. Luckily, I was only not well for about 2 or 3 weeks before I was fully recovered. So I thought, okay, that wasn't fun, not a great idea. Let's just not do that again, and it'll be fine. Fast forward about 2 years, and my second concussion happened while I was playing football. I was a wide receiver, and again, also happened in practice. I jumped up to catch a pass, and my teammate who was defending me kind of hit me in the leg, so I landed on my back and then hit my head on the way down. That one took longer to recover from. It was about 3 or 4 months for a full recovery, but there was a pretty good, steady progression of improvement, so that was encouraging at least, and it happened early in first semester, and by second semester I didn't need any more accommodations or help or anything like that. So I thought, okay, that's enough concussions now. Hopefully everything will be okay now that I've recovered. And then this third concussion that I'm still living with today happened a little over 2 years ago. I was sitting down working on a computer, and there's a friend grabbing something from a bin in a shelf above my head, and they accidentally knocked the bin over, and it hit me on the head. At first I had a headache, and I thought, okay, this isn't great, but we'll see. I've had a couple concussions before. Maybe it's just a headache, maybe it's nothing. Woke up the next day, and I was feeling really nauseous, dizzy, exhausted. I didn't have the same balance I used to. Just going outside and being in sunlight would be enough to trigger symptoms and things like that. So I, at that point, knew, okay, this is definitely a concussion, but hopefully it'll get better kind of in a similar way the other ones did. It'll, be a good recovery, a good trajectory forward. I'll have kind of good, steady progress, and then back to my old self in no time. And I kind of held on to that idea and held on to that hope for about 6 months or so, somewhere in that ballpark, where every day I woke up and I thought, like, okay, today's the day that I'm going to start getting better. Today's the day that I'm going to start really recovering. And it just never quite happened. I was sleeping 12, 14 hours a day. Being in the sunlight was still be hard. Going into a grocery store would just give me really severe headaches, dizziness, things like that. And so I guess after 6 months or so, and there wasn't really any one specific point, but between 6 months and 9 months, maybe even a year out from the injury, I kind of came to understand and eventually accept that my life is different now, that I do have a brain injury, and that's something I'm going to have to kind of live with and adjust to the best that I can. It's definitely not what I had in mind or what I ever thought that my 20s would be like, or maybe my future would be like, but it's kind of the track I'm on now, and it's the plan I'm on now, so try to make the best of it. And I think around that time I started coming to the peer support group with a lot of encouragement from my family, and met people there. I started doing different treatments, which have helped improve my symptoms. And at this point, I'm in a much better place than I was. I don't have any light sensitivity or noise sensitivity anymore, which is really nice. The headaches, nausea, and dizziness are all a lot less than they were before. And for me now, the thing I'm kind of dealing with the most is the cognitive fatigue. So I guess the best way I would have to explain this is my brain feels like a really, really old phone or computer battery or something like that, where it open and it says 100% and it works and it feels really, and you think okay, it's going to be good, and then you use it for 20 or 30 minutes and all of a sudden you're down to 50%, and then you use it for a little bit more, maybe you have a couple things running at the same time, and all of a sudden after an hour and a half you're at 0% and you need to plug it in and recharge or it'll shut down. That's kind of how my brain works now, whereas before I was able to work a full day, be with hang out with friends or do other things like that. I'm very cognizant and aware now that I kind of have an hour and a half somewhere in there, where I feel relatively well, where I can kind of achieve things, and then I need to back off, need to rest, need to take a nap, something like that. So that's kind of the thing I'm always thinking about and living with, is thinking, okay, what's the thing that I need to accomplish today, and how can I prepare myself and set myself up so that I'm able to do that. A little silver lining of it is a little liberating, because I do get to look at my days and say, okay, there's one very most important thing that I'm going to do today, and then what's the second most important thing I'm going to do today, and then I can kind of cut everything else out and simplify it, and do the best I can with that. But that's kind of where I am now, and what I'm dealing with the most. And In conclusion, I'd also just like to thank my family. They're sitting there for really supporting me through the whole process. I know it hasn't been easy for them, and I wouldn't be here like in this position, as well recovered as I am, without them. And also thank you to the peer support group and all of you that I know in the audience as well. I really appreciate you guys, and you guys feel like a second family to me as we all kind of learn how to get better and also be better people, which has been really nice.
Andy, I think you should give yourself a lot of support too, and a lot of praise. You should be very proud, and your family has been just beautiful for you, but you should give yourself support and praise, and you helped all of us too.
Thanks.
It's we're very proud of you. Very
Every
proud of
time
you.
I've come to support group and I see that what you're going through makes me feel better because I know I'm doing better.
Thanks, Scott.
My girlfriend has really been a big support for me. She's been amazing. And it hasn't been easy for her either. Because before my accident, I wasn't like this.
Thank you for sharing, Andy. I know dealing with a brain injury is very tough, and if there's anything positive that came from this, I think is that the rest of us here have gotten a chance to meet you and gotten to, I guess, feel how big a heart you have. So thank you as well. And next, I want to introduce Jason, a good friend of ours who has come from a different state, actually, come a long ways to be with us again. So the floor is yours now, Jason. Welcome back.
Thanks, Kevin. I did something interesting today with a friend of mine. I went back to the scene of the crime that changed my life. 2 years ago, I fell off a cliff 430 feet down over boulders and fallen trees, and I'm here, right? So I'm actually very happy about that. And in an instant, everything changed. No helmet was going to help that one, but as I laid down on that hill, I woke up about an hour later, and I really didn't know where I was. And I'm laying on an 80-degree hillside, and I couldn't sit up because I'll tell you why in a minute. And I couldn't see very well, and had no clue where I was, and I could try and move around, and boulders were going down the hill next to me, and took like a minute or two to hit. It felt like to hit the bottom. I go, this is not a good situation. So I actually started to freak out, and I actually thought I was dying at that moment. And I might have even died and come back. I have no clue. But I wasn't religious going into that moment, but that kind of made my perception change a little bit. And I heard this inaudible voice that said, Jason, I got some news for you. You're going to have disabilities the rest of your life. You're going to lose your high-paying job. You're going to lose your dream house, your luxury cars, all the trappings that go in that, and your wife's going to leave. And then it said, but you found me, and whoever that was, and you can make that own opinion for yourself, but I think I know who it was. And you're going to be happy as you've ever been in your life. And all that came true. So I was hyperventilating, freaking out a little bit, blood everywhere, and I had all of a sudden started calming down, and I was super calm, and I reached down, and I couldn't believe I had my cell phone in my pocket, and called 911, figured out 911. An hour later, there's 3 helicopters flying over, 40 EMS and firefighters looking for me. A young guy about this age comes down, sits next to me. He says, "Sir," I go, "Yeah, how's your day going?" And he says, "That tree you're pinned up against, it's the only thing keeping you from another drop of about 600 feet." And that got me thinking. I remember him radioing up to the battalion chief at the top of the hill, and it said, and the chief asked him how I was, and said, "Well, I don't see an inch of his body's not bleeding, and I can see his brain, but his vitals are like perfect." So it just again told me the message I was receiving to calm down, whatever that was. So it took them 3 hours to get me up that hill, and it flew me here to Stanford, and all the Stanford the keen surgeons and doctors and nurses and physical therapists put Humpty Dumpty back together again as best they could. And it's been a long road back, but it's not a point that I feel bad about any of it. It's, in fact, you know, some people ask, what did you get any power out of, secret ability out of all this? I lost my eyesight to the right. I broke my back in 3 places. I broke my neck, I broke my ribs, broke my shoulder. Brain injuries that caused bleeding, that caused strokes, and I lost a vision to everything on the right. So everybody on the left, you're beautiful. On the right, I have no idea. But as I got home, a few weeks later, my wife left, and then which was weird. And she's a nurse, and all of a sudden you're alone. I wasn't even walking. I had to learn to walk. Everything actually again. It makes you think. Okay, so how am I going to take this? Lying down, or you know, fight and get back up? And I did, with the grace of God, determination, and just willpower. And then I came across this Synapse. By the way, who is here that's part of the Synapse? Could you raise your hand real quick? So the doctors and the medical staff saved my life in those 20 days I was here. But this group, and who from the group is here? Support group. I know Brian's here. Some other faces. I don't know you guys yet, but I will. And these good people, they saved my life as well. Because when you're going through a brain injury like this, there's fatigue, depression, light sensitivity, noise. The worst thing is chronic fatigue. But and trying to explain it when you have this, it's almost impossible because you don't understand it yourself. I always say, it's my new tagline, I'm going to trademark it, is don't even know my own reality sometimes. And but when I went to group, I had a relation with these people that they understood, and I don't think they can explain it any better than I can. You know, it's really challenging. And as you said, you only have so much brain power. When my brain turns off, it's gone. And if I go too low, it might take days to get it back before you can do anything. And that's kind of a weird place to be. But since that time, I've been building. I've been trying to exercise. I found God, and I've opened up. I've become a better person. And that's talking, and I want people to know that I don't want anybody feeling sorry for me, and I don't think the group does either. They're the sweetest people I've ever met in my life. We just want validation that we're trying our best, because I get frustrated, and I don't think I've mentioned that in a while to the group, but you get frustrated because you guys don't know what we're going through, and it's really hard. And when somebody says, "Oh, you look fine, and you can do this," or, you know, oh, my memory's going too. Yeah, that's true. I get it. Mine was going before the fall, but it's a totally different level. And again, I know we're all going through something. If you have a TBI or know somebody with TBI or have an illness or know somebody with an illness or whatever it may be, we're all going through something. And in closing, I want to thank all you guys so much. I love you all, and I just think we could all do a better job of just encouraging each other, being nicer to each other, and I don't mean just in this room, but in the whole world. And I'm going to do my little part to make that happen if I can. So, thank you very much for.
We love you too, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone, for sharing your stories. Now, for the next 5 minutes, I want to open the floor to all of you. If anyone has questions you would like to ask the panelists.
I remember you.
I'm another Synapse.
What's her name? What's your name?
Really radical question for the TBI survivors on the panel. How many of you have been bitten by a tick once in your life at least?
By a what?
By a tick?
Tick.
Have either of you been bit by
I
a tick?
have been bit by it too.
I have not.
I've gotten bitten by a tick, but a long time ago before my accident.
Yeah.
Because I'm asking because I'm a brain injury survivor and I come here for my care, and I am about a year and a half out of the woods from this awful auto accident. And what I think is really cutting edge research that I'd love to see happening here at Stanford is that there are a couple of universities, the New York University Department of Rehabilitation and one university in Texas is looking at post-concussive syndrome, which is like if you had the accident, you know, a year and a half or 2 years prior, and you're still suffering from TBI syndrome or symptoms, depending on if you had a mild TBI or what the type of TBI is. It's very unknown, but there's a connection between Lyme disease and traumatic brain injuries that is not being talked about. And so I'm just fascinated because I started to finally get treated by an amazing integrative neurologist in San Francisco who specializes in TBIs and Lyme disease. And I'm all of a sudden rocking and rolling like I haven't been able to get in 2 years because I had a concurrent infection. So I think that's just something to say. He says in 2/3 of his TBI sufferers, which is what we have here, a small little sample group, he sees that they have a lingering Borrelia infection that is undetectable by most blood tests, and most Western medicine providers know nothing about it. And so maybe that's the future. Maybe Lyme disease is where HIV or polio was in the past, and I'm getting treated for Lyme disease, and it's really helping my TBI. So that's just a question and a thought.
Good for you.
Being here and for the times you've supported me and for everyone in this program.
Thank you as well.
If I could say one more thing, Kevin, because that's actually probably number one on my list, and that's just the caregiver. So I met Julie, Andy's mom, before I met him because he didn't want to go, didn't know what it was about, whatever. He's a kid.
Guilty.
And Debbie, I mean, I can't think of, I'm sure there are equal among us that, and I'm sure your parents and your dad and your sister feel the same way, but that are more caring and compassionate and supportive, and I know that's why you choked up. And but I was always envious when I didn't have somebody that you guys had that, and I was so happy that you did. And thank you so much for supporting your loved ones. It's critically important to us. And Brian?
Oh, your son. Tell them about your son.
What do you want to say about my son? Did he get in trouble again?
He's in Vietnam. I don't know. I've never met him, but I've heard him talk about him a lot. So it's been really good.
Yeah. So my son, through a series of things, in film and through, I won't go into the story, but he wound up in Vietnam to visit a friend. He stayed there for 6 years, and now he's got quite a production going. Right now, he's getting mastered by all the greatest Asia film masters right now. And I didn't even really tell him when I had my accident, because that's what parents do. They don't want to worry their kids. But eventually I did, but I downplayed it, and then I saw him. And I'm not sure what you want me to get to on that point, except for we were very close before, and now we're inseparable. And it's almost like the reverse roles and father and son in some ways. Aww. I'm not quite willing to go all the way with that yet, but and I'm sure it happens eventually anyway, but it just is bridged an incredible relationship. And the other thing about relationships is I've dated a bit, as some of the group knows, and that's confidential, don't forget. But I've had a way of sabotaging relationships because I don't know how I'm going to be treating them. I almost break up so that I don't hurt them down the road. I'm seeing somebody right now that's very special, and I'm hope to have learned from my lessons. And but relationships are really critical to all of us. Sorry to ramble on.
Can you discuss some of the horrors of the workers' comp?
Just try to make it extra painful for me, huh?
You were choking up earlier, so I know more discomfort is what we need.
Yeah.
Because I didn't need I had the private private insurance or whatever it is, but I wasn't having to deal with the workers' comp, so my scenario was a little different with some of my early care. So just because I don't think a lot of people know the disaster that it really is.
Sure, happy to talk about it. Yeah, so with this most recent concussion, I was hurt at work. I was sitting at my computer at work while I was hurt, and due to that, despite having private insurance, Since I was hurt at work, I was kind of like locked into the workers' compensation system, which is regulated by the state of California. And so there was a different private insurance company which was providing the care, and theoretically it's supposed to be a really great thing since you don't have any deductibles, you're not paying anything out of pocket, anything like that. But I think the kind of two big failings of the workers' comp system, or two big frustrations I would have with it, is one, the very limited provider network. So I, am from the area and would love to have gone to a lot of the great doctors here at Stanford or in San Francisco or somewhere else, but they have a very, very limited provider network, and workers' comp doesn't cover anybody in the whole Stanford medical system or in Redwood City or a concussion clinic or anything like that. So that's been a huge challenge and impediment to my recovery, is finding treatment in places that will engage with the workers' comp system and take workers' comp, and then having workers' comp going back and approving it. And it's oftentimes 20, 30, 40, 50 phone calls and emails back and forth to get anything approved. And I think that's the other big frustration with it, is that there's kind of and I guess this ties into what you were saying as well, with like being more understanding and trying to be supportive of people. I think there's a kind of an ethos of, well, why aren't you back at work yet? Why aren't you better yet? Why is this taking so long? Instead of, how can we support you? What can we do to help you get better and get back to work? So kind of the stigma on the one end and then the limited provider network on the other end has definitely been a lot of frustration. And of course, the only thing you want to do when you only have a little bit of bandwidth a day is to spend it on the phone with the workers' comp people. So that hasn't been ideal, but.
Yeah, by the way, just, to give an example of the fatigue, by the way, I wanted to mention this point too, is our brains, Debbie excluded, working 5 times harder to do the same small task as yours are. So if you're mowing the lawn and you're tired, imagine doing it 5 times or whatever the case may be. But, and that's what wears us down really quickly.
Something you said was very interesting.
That's the first time.
When I had my accident, that was my pickup truck. This right-hand driver in South Africa. And on the left-hand side, there was a man sitting next to me with long gray hair and a beard. He smiled and he touched my shoulder and then touched my leg. And he said, "You're going to be okay." So either that was God himself or an angel.
And that meant the world to you, right?
Yeah,
buddy?
it did.
Yeah.
And as soon as they took me out, I was caught underneath my steering wheel. And so they had to use the jaws of life to open the door. And then they cut the bottom of the steering wheel so I could get my legs out. And as soon as they laid me down on the gurney to put me in the ambulance, I was out cold.
Yeah.
And one thing he didn't say was that here's the truck and here's the driver right here, but the container fell like this. So there couldn't have really been someone sitting next to him. And he asked the paramedics, "Where's that man that was sitting next to me?" And they said something in Afrikaans, like, he's kind of delirious or something. But the other EMT realized that he had a spiritual visitor to encourage him along the way.
The other EMT said to me in English, he said, "There couldn't have been anybody sitting next to you. That side's completely crushed. Tell me what you see." I said, "I see a bit of darkness." He says, "But that's because the containers are laying on that side." And that's all I remember.
All right. I apologize to stop the questions short, but due to time, we'd like to move on to the next speaker. But I want to thank everyone on the panel for sharing your stories and everyone who's asked questions. If you're a member in the community who has a brain injury and wants to attend the support group, please talk to one of the students afterwards and we can give you more information. Oh, yeah, there's flyers out there too. Yeah, so thank you very much. Oh, the next support group meeting is next Saturday, March 9th. Yeah, thank you. March 9th, yes. 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. at the Hoover Pavilion. We'll send more information via email. Yes. Same place as the last 4 years, yes. Yeah. A different room now, though. Room 408 instead of 308. Yes. Right. With that, I'd like to give the floor back to Saket. Yeah.
Okay, let's give them another round of applause. That was amazing. I really want to thank all 4 of you for coming and being willing to share your story like that. I know it takes a lot of courage, and honestly, in the last 2 years that I've been at Synapse, coming to the meeting and hearing y'all's stories, and I guess everything that y'all are willing to share is so inspirational, and I'm sure every student in Synapse would agree that it's our favorite part of being in the organization. I think with that, we'll move on to our, I guess, final speaker of the night. We're really lucky to have with us Dean Lloyd Minor. Dean Minor is the Carl and Elizabeth Newman Dean of Stanford University School of Medicine, a position he has held since December of 2012. He's also professor of otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, and a professor of bioengineering and neurobiology by courtesy here at Stanford. Under Dean Minor's leadership, Stanford Medicine has established a strategic vision to lead the biomedical revolution in precision health. Before coming to Stanford, Dean Minor was provost and senior vice president for academic affairs of the Johns Hopkins University. Prior to his appointment as provost in 2009, Dean Minor served as the Andelot professor and director or chair of the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery in the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. With more than 140 published articles and chapters, Dr. Minor, or Dean Minor, is an expert in balance and inner ear disorders. In the medical community, Dean Minor is perhaps best known for his discovery of superior canal dehiscence syndrome, a debilitating disorder characterized by sound or pressure-induced dizziness. He subsequently developed a surgical procedure that corrects the problem and alleviates these symptoms. Throughout his trailblazing career, Dean Minor has received several prestigious honors, including being elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2012. Please join me in welcoming Dean Minor.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I, too, want to thank the panelists for your insights and for your incredible courage in confronting such a challenging condition and in sharing your experiences with us so that we can all learn from your experiences and hopefully make a contribution in the future to reducing the profound impact of traumatic brain injury. I also want to thank and congratulate the students who organized this group and who put together this symposium today. You know, I've been at Stanford now a little over 6 years, and I'm continually amazed by our students, by their dedication, by their desire to have an impact in the world, and by the wisdom and the dedication and the enthusiasm that they bring to everything that they do. So for the students who make Synapse such a successful group, thank you for your time and your devotion. And I know that because of what you're doing, in the future, you are the people who are going to make the next major advances in the prevention and in the treatment of traumatic brain injury. And I wanted to just touch on one theme very briefly this evening, and that is doing away with the notion of never. And let me explain what I mean by that. Every time in history, in the history of medicine that I know of, when we've said, oh, that can never be done, or there will never be a treatment or prevention for this, or there's never any hope for this disease or this person, every time that I know of in the history of medicine that pronouncement, that very pernicious pronouncement has been made, it's been proven to be wrong. It's been proven to be wrong because of people like you in this room this evening. And I just wanted to share with you one example of where never has been proven to be wrong here in relationship to a specific condition and disorder that is all too common, but that we now have much more effective treatments for. There's a neurologist on our faculty, Dr. Greg Albers. His area of focus is in stroke, and in particular thromboembolic stroke. These are strokes that are caused by blood clots in the major vessels that provide the blood supply to the brain. And when I was in medical school and training, our teaching was that a thrombotic stroke, a stroke caused by a blood clot, that there was nothing we could do to treat or to stop the progression of that stroke once it had begun. That we were relegated simply to dealing with the effects of the stroke as best we could after the stroke had occurred. Now today, thankfully, that adage, that misconception is something of the past. And Dr. Albers and his team have been influential forces here at Stanford and nationally in developing treatments and doing away with that never attitude when it came to what could be done to intervene in a thromboembolic stroke. But it wasn't an easy process. When Dr. Albers and his team were developing mechanisms to dissolve or remove clot from occluded vessels, either by administering thrombolytic agents that dissolve the clot or by using intravascular devices that go in and actually remove the clot from the artery, there were a lot of naysayers that said, oh, the risks of doing that will far exceed the benefits. And besides, once injury to brain tissue starts occurring, there's nothing that can be done to reverse it or to stop its progression, that it was inevitable that once a stroke started, it was going to proceed through its logical progression and cause whatever damage it was going to cause. Now, fortunately, and my reason for choosing this example and for talking about doing away with never and never having never is that Dr. Albers and his colleagues didn't accept the notion that there was nothing that could be done. They didn't accept the notion that stroke was a field immune from the effects of innovation and disruption. And because of their persistence, we had early thrombolytic therapies and early interventions to remove clot from occluded vessels. But then there was another series of nevers. So the thought was that, yes, okay, if you caught a thromboembolic stroke, say within the first 3 hours, and you were able to intervene within this very narrow and constrained time period, then yes, you could probably have some beneficial impact. But if it was outside of that time window, you weren't going to be able to have any effect. And again, Dr. Albers and his colleagues didn't accept never, didn't accept no, but kept persisting and showed that that time window, which was arbitrarily chosen initially, was actually far too restricted, and that you could have beneficial impact in the treatment of thromboembolic stroke far longer than what had conventionally been thought to be the window in which intervention would be effective. And today, now, thousands of people with thromboembolic stroke can enjoy the benefits of highly specialized therapies that, yes, were and are innovative and disruptive in the way they've been designed and conceived, but also, even with the technology and even with the science, the only reason they're in use today is because people like Greg Albers didn't accept the notion that there was never going to be any beneficial treatment. So my thoughts that I would leave with you this evening is also don't ever accept the notion that there's nothing that can be done to treat a brain injury once it occurs. We've seen that proven wrong time and time again. Traumatic brain injury remains among the most challenging conditions that we deal with in medicine today. We know it's not going to be easy to have impact, but also I know the Stanford spirit, and I know the spirit of the students and the faculty that make this such an amazing research university and academic medical center. And I know that when someone says to us here that something can never be done, that we will never be able to have impact in an area, that for us, that's just an incentive to go after it with even more vigor and vitality. And so for all of you who, both our students and also those of you who have experienced and suffered from traumatic brain injury, I would offer the hope that because of people like our students here, because of the spirit that dominates at this institution and at many, many other institutions across the country and the world today, I firmly believe that there's hope in the future, today and in the future, for traumatic brain injury. And I firmly reject the notion that there will never be something that can be done to improve the plight and the lot of patients who have suffered from these horribly debilitating injuries and conditions. So thank you very much for the energy, the enthusiasm, the spirit that both students and patients who have suffered traumatic brain injury, thank you very much for what you bring to us, for what you bring to the lives through your engagement, what you bring to the lives of so many other unspoken people with traumatic brain injury. And keep up your energy and your enthusiasm moving forward. Together we can and we will have transformative impact. Thank you.
With that, we conclude, I guess, the formal portion of our conference with the speakers. We'll now sort of break out into a few sessions. We'll have an opportunity if you want to touch real brain preserved samples. We'll have a VR demo from the iSync team and a couple of other activities, including the Park and Transportation Services. We'll be able to provide bike safety materials and information about that. And of course, we have pizza. So feel free to help yourself to that. And that'll be right where the boba was. And we ask that you exit through this door because they set up the brain samples on that side. We don't want to run into that. And then, yeah, the one announcement that they asked me to make was they, I guess, sort of have liability issues, so they don't want us to take any pictures of the brain samples, so please refrain from doing so. But other than that, the time is yours. Thank you so much for coming.